Call the meeting to order. This is the May 28, 2019 meeting of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission for the Town of Fairfield. Just for the record, I missed last session. I'm up to speed. I watched the tapes. We have Commissioners Corcoran and Noonan who are not here. We think Commissioner Noonan will be coming, but until he does, Commissioner DiGiacomo will sit in place of Commissioner Noonan and Commissioner Elliott for Commissioner Corcoran. First item on the agenda are the meeting minutes for May 14th, 2019. Can I have a motion?
To approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner McAleese.
Second.
Second by Levy. Thank you. Any comments or corrections?
I could not find anything.
I didn't see anything myself. I should abstain from this though because I wasn't here physically. Okay, any other comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I abstain. So the minutes are adopted unanimously. Next item are new applications to recommend a public hearing. First is 2425 Morehouse Highway, special exception application of the Town of Fairfield pertaining to the construction of a new clubhouse and cart barn facility at the Smith Richardson Golf Course.
I have nothing to add, Mr. Chairman. The town is looking to replace the existing clubhouse of the golf course. It'll be subject to hearing in a couple weeks. It requires a public hearing.
Okay, excellent.
Motion to move to public hearing as is
Okay.
required.
Motion by Commissioner McAleese.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Francis. Any questions for staff? Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? It's moved to public hearing unanimously. Next is 464 Pine Creek Avenue, special exception application and coastal site plan application of David and Mary Holtz pertaining to the construction of a single-family dwelling in the floodplain zone.
This is an application that was approved by this commission in 2014. There have been a couple of successor buyers. This current buyer was looking to implement the plan, but since it's been 5 years, there was not an extension applied for. It requires a new application. So it's a special exception because it's in the floodplain zone for a single-family residence.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Move to public hearing.
Motion by Commissioner McAleese. Second by Commissioner Francis. Any questions for staff? Public hearing.
That is the one way down at the end of the street.
Correct. All the way down in the end on the little left. Yep.
Okay. Anything else? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? It's moved to public hearing unanimously. Next item is old business, 175 Jefferson Street, special exception application of Sacred Heart University pertaining to the construction of a new student residence hall in the R3 zone.
Mr. Chairman, this is the third of the three last dorms to be proposed for the former Jewish home property. The other, there are two nearing, will be complete this December. Two others were approved a couple of weeks ago by this commission. This is the last of the development build-out for that parcel. This is a special exception application, so the conditions for approval are whether the location, type, character, and size of the buildings and structures shall be in harmony with and conformity to the appropriate and orderly development of the town and neighborhood. Is the nature of the location of the use in buildings or structures such that there be adequate access for fire protection? Are the streets serving the proposed use adequate to carry prospective traffic? And is the proposed use in conformity with the master plan? Again, this is continuing the university's mission of trying to get more kids from off campus onto their campus and would essentially complete the build out at that parcel. One thing to consider, I was remiss in not bringing it up last time with the last approval that was granted, but we should get a street tree planting plan approval by the tree warden. It wasn't included in we had sidewalks taken care of last time, but I omitted the requirement for a street tree plan subject to the approval of the tree warden, if you're inclined to approve this application.
Okay. Very good.
Oh,
I thought you were
I was.
drawing nigh for
No, I just want to ask.
a grand motion. You
All
were.
right, move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Francis,
Ask a question.
second by Commissioner McAleese. You want to start? You want to start? Anyone?
And yes, this is a good plan and finishes their university well, at that section anyway, and it was good. And did you get an answer to our question on how many students will now be able to reside on campus?
No, this was the total number of beds on campus?
Yeah.
I do not have the answer to that
After they
question.
build this. Okay. Thank you.
Good. I agree, this was an excellent application, as we've seen with the past 6 or 7 from the university. And in this particular case, it is in harmony with the surrounding neighborhood. The location fits the proposed use. We didn't see any impact at all. In fact, I think the net was a reduction in traffic because more students are going to be living on campus. And the use is conforming with our master plan. So subject to the department's recommendation for approval of the tree planting plan by the tree warden, I would approve this.
We actually, I don't think, caught that in the motion. So your motion includes a condition for a tree plan approved by the warden, Commissioner Francis?
Correct.
Okay, and Commissioner McAleese, you agree with that?
acceptable.
Yeah, okay. Very good. Anyone else? No, like I said, I watched the tape, I saw, reviewed the plans. Thought everyone did a good job asking questions. I also am curious about the number of beds, you know?
We'll certainly get the answer to that question.
Yeah. Yeah, and thinking through the whole, the plan, I mean, it's wonderful. These comments shouldn't be taken negatively, but, yeah, I do struggle a little bit with the notion that traffic, or no, the number of cars is actually going to go down, you know? We're taking students from the town and putting them on campus, likely more of them with cars, because now we got this nice big parking structure. And then people are going to move into those homes down by the beach, you know. So, right? I mean, those cars are going to get replaced down there. But the likelihood is the students won't be driving nearly as much because they're going to be on campus. They're just going to use the cars in a different way. But that was just one thing that struck me about that whole discussion, you know. But I agree with your other comments in terms of the special exception analysis in the application. So. Any other comments, questions? We ready to vote? Motion is to approve with condition for the tree warden. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Commissioner Francis, opposed? Any abstentions? No. So the application is approved 6-1 with the condition of approval. And that concludes our old business. And we can move to our fourth item, our planning discussion, which is our presentation of the TOD study, for which we have our illustrious director and assistant director of planning. Thank you.
It's all or nothing, right?
Should we move? Are we looking behind us?
Right, so that's for the audience. This, what we have in front of us is what you're projecting,
No,
correct?
the,
Little different?
what we are presenting is a subset of what you have in front of you. So
Okay,
we'll walk kind of through some of this. So first of all, we're pleased to have the opportunity to present this to you on a night we don't have a public hearing. This has been an ongoing project that's been an intensely collaborative one between the staff, myself, Emmeline, and Mark Barnhart, who is not here, the public, which has been very active in this commission, as well as the Economic Development Commission. So we're very happy to present this kind of summary update and then present the draft plan to you. So, as you know, this commission participated in all of these meetings. We had four very well-attended public outreach meetings in June, starting in June of last year, then again on the stormy night of September 25th, October 30th, and February 7th, and we're really grateful for the turnout and the input that we got from the public. So the goals that we set forth for this plan were to enhance the Fairfield metro area as a potential district to work, live, and play. We wanted to encourage housing development that expands options for young professionals and seniors. Help our downtown, because obviously the downtown train station area was part of this proposal, to be continue to thrive as a walkable community destination, and importantly, to help the town's financial end of things with growing the tax base while maintaining our sense of community, and articulate what kind of standards that this commission would like for design and development, and also potentially increase our stock of affordable housing units. So our study findings, and this information should not be foreign to you. A lot of this information was presented in one form or another of those four meetings, so we're just kind of recapping some of the main points here. But the market study that will be an appendix in this plan indicates that there's a 5-year support for absorption of 1,700 to 2,000 new dwelling units between the Metro Center and downtown station areas. Current snapshot of where we are in town, that 59% of all U.S. households contain just 1 or 2 persons, but for Fairfield that number is higher, it's 65%, so 65% of our households in town contain just 1 or 2 persons, and 35% of our households are families with children. So the market study tried to pin down who the potential Okay. Who the potential customer base is for units in downtown and metro, and they determined that there's a strong interest for young singles and couples, a pretty strong 26% for empty nesters and retirees, which they pointed out in their presentation is a higher percentage than typical, and then 8% for non-traditional traditional families.
Did you have your slides?
Hmm?
Did you have your slides?
No.
All right.
I'm following along.
Okay.
So what does that potential mean? There's, again, the numbers over 5 years. What the study pointed out, and what we've seen through development, or the lack thereof, is that there is not a large office demand for major office development, requiring, in order to do so, would require landing a major tenant. Obviously, the owners and developers of the Metro Center development haven't been able to do so as yet. The study further points out that there's a need for more mixed-use setting, particularly at Metro Center, to be competitive, and that additional residential development is needed to support the dining and retail options down at Metro Center. Again, we can see this anecdotally in our Trademark 1 example, where the residential component filled up rather quickly, but yet the commercial ground floor component is not filling up as rapidly. So with more activity down in that area, it should increase the draw and demand for that commercial space. So this is a map of the current overlay zoning in the Metro Center area, with the teal kind of colored outline as our existing Commerce Drive Area Design District boundary line. The two, showing a 5 to 10 and 10 to 15 minute walk shed from the station, with the underlying primarily commercial in red zoning and industrial in gray. So the plan, and this is a page from your report that you have, is considering, recommending expanding within the Commerce Drive boundary, which is the blue outline. The commission had originally identified some parcels that would be potentially eligible for the transit-oriented district overlay opportunity. In what the report is suggesting is that should be expanded, the eligibility area expanded to those areas outlined by the white dashed line that fall all within the Commerce Drive area district, with the exception of, there's a recommendation to include in the kind of the southwest corner there, the area where Fitness Edge, the area between New England Avenue and Grassmere Avenue, and also considering pushing that line back to include the entirety of the BJ's parcel on the right-hand side of the drawing. So we went through throughout the public outreach. We did some scenario testing and discussion with the public. In scenario B, and we'll kind of toggle back and forth between scenario B and scenario C, were are the same amount of development square footage, just in a little bit different package. But that was the, if you go back to B, maybe the level of development that was kind of conceived to be the consensus potential. There was a scenario D that was even more development that didn't get nearly as much support. But you can see in the left-hand side the potential for 5-year, 10-year, 20-year kind of potential build-out. Again, looking at a very long-range view of what might be possible. A mix of residential in yellow, commercial in blue, and the purple color is a hotel that was originally on the drawing board for the Metro Center and continues to be in the plans for the current development proposal for Metro Center. We can go on to, so with that scenario discussion in mind, we went on to discuss potential land use implications and what tweaks to our regulatory framework might be needed to achieve that potential. So one of the suggestions is to reduce the minimum parcel size in the TOD overlay, which is presently 35,000 square feet minimum, to 10,000 square feet, which would allow other parcels to potentially be activated with that development opportunity. And that's how the current parcel breakdown shakes out as it's presently constituted.
We're
Yep,
still
yep.
talking about just Commerce Drive?
Yes, that recommendation would solely be for the metro area, the surrounding Metro Center area. Along with that, and some of these, we will talk about some recommendations for downtown, some of which are redundant with some of the ones for Commerce Drive. But clearly, the public feedback that we got was that there's more of an appetite for more in the Metro Center area than there is for downtown. There's concern about overdeveloping downtown, and so it's more of an infill kind of scenario for the downtown recommendations. But getting into the commercial piece, recommending a minimum 15-foot ground floor height to allow for conversion, easy conversion for commercial, a variety of commercial uses. There was some discussion and kind of consensus to allow a bit of a higher height. Presently, our height requirement is 60 feet in the TOD. The recommendation is go to 70 feet, but at 5 stories. Again, mainly because of the modern design style calling for taller floor heights, and particularly if we're talking about a minimum of a 15-foot floor height on the first floor, then to allow larger floor plate heights on the upper floor, still achieving 5 stories, but allowing a height of 70 feet. The discussion was to, again, one of the findings of the study was that the 50 bedroom per acre density that we currently permit tends to create larger units in that the floor plans, to limit the space to 50 bedrooms per acre with the floor area that's permitted, tends to create a larger unit size, and so at a higher density of bedrooms, you'd get a broader mix of sizes of units in more of them, which would, allow for more affordable units. The example was shown, as shown on the right here, is a very small project in Boston on 0.19 acres, but 13 units, but ends up being 100 bedrooms per acre in terms of the mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. So it just would allow more flexibility, particularly at smaller sites, and to get a broader mix of units. Right now, the first, that we saw in Trademark 1, while there is a large market opportunity in demand for dwelling units, there's only a subset of that. A thin layer of that demand is for the the highest end or highest cost units, and so there's a market need for smaller, more mid-priced units. A large part of the discussion that we've had over the course of this study was to eliminate the requirement across the board that retail be located on the first floor. Rather, what this study is suggesting is we identify the key places here highlighted in red where that ought to be mandated, and then let the market dictate the uses elsewhere. But eliminating the 30% minimum commercial square footage in any particular building and allow that to go kind of horizontally across the district rather than being required vertically in any particular building. There was some discussion about enhancing our buffering requirements and drainage requirements for parking lots, for an additional tree requirements. So this is a slide that we've seen before. Also, with respect to parking structures, this is an example of an existing building on the Post Road, but to require that if there's going to be a parking structure facing the street, that it should have at least a 20-foot depth of occupied use between the street and the parking structure, so you don't have that inactive streetscape. We talked a lot about parking regulations in terms of, again, limited to the Metro Center, but giving some consideration to the same incentive or reduction that we have for retail downtown as one space for the first 1,500 feet, equalizing the outdoor seating, or equalizing, particularly, and in the report it's a little bit more definitive than this slide, is equalizing the restaurant parking and retail parking so as tenants come and go in a particular business, that you don't have that need to suddenly, because a restaurant may require for a particular tenant more parking than the previous retail store, that doesn't add another layer of regulatory burden for that to happen. Giving some consideration for our bike parking, recalibrating the bicycle parking so that there's adequate space and storage for bicycles, but not an overabundance or burden on the property. And considering now car sharing potential that in provision for electrical vehicle parking, some incentives for that amenity, that maybe you get a slight reduction in your parking if you provide a car share service, and also trying to induce people to put the infrastructure in for electric car charging. We talked about reduction of parking for residential. Presently, we're at 1 space per bedroom, or 1.25 spaces per unit, whichever is less. We talked quite a bit about the trademark, behaving more like a 1-to-1. And in your report, there's a more specific recommendation that we discussed at our planning meeting, is perhaps that we keep the the parking exactly the way it is until you've provided 75 parking spaces, and then beyond that, perhaps going to 1 per unit thereafter. Again, in your handout, there's a little bit more specific recommendations in more eloquent text to kind of back up those recommendations. So we talked about trying to, if we are going to allow a larger density, should there be a higher threshold of affordable units? And our consultants tested that out quite a bit, and we originally thought we could push towards 15%, and they were recommended to us that we hold the line at 11 or 12%, particularly because the larger developments are going to need structured parking, and to kind of keep tabs on that going forward to see how those numbers look. But they weren't recommending to us to make the jump to 15%, but we could probably pull off 11 or 12%. And then talked about maybe allowing a higher threshold of income for below market rates if it's going to be a for sale unit. While we don't get affordable housing credit for a unit that's higher than 80% area median income, there's certainly a need for units that for folks that are at 100% or 120% of area median income. It's kind of a space in the market where there's just not a lot of supply, and there's a lot of demand at that price point. So in downtown, there was some discussion about potentially looking at some of the area adjacent to our center design district, and maybe consider rezoning some of the post road from DCD to CBD to center design if appropriate, because we do have some existing very strong form-based requirements and innovative strategies for parking, for instance, that could potentially be broadened if the commission deems that appropriate. But similar to some of the discussion at Metro Center, there was some broad-based acceptance to the idea of eliminating what's presently now to residential units downtown or in the east. It can be no more than 50% of the ground, of the floor area of a building. There was some discussion, recommendation to increase that percentage upwards to 80%. Particularly if we don't have a lot of 4-story buildings downtown, we do permit 4-story buildings. But to increase that residential percentage beyond 50%, and requiring still that businesses, professional offices be on the ground floor. But there was some consideration, hey, if you're not on the post road, maybe it does, we're still going to permit a business and professional office as long as it still has that storefront look. Right now, there's a requirement that there be customer and client traffic, which is, a bit subjective, but to relaxing the non-post road frontage in a little bit broader mix of uses that might be permitted on the ground floor. One of the other recommendations was to reduce the minimum floor area per unit downtown from right now it's 750 square feet per unit down to 450 square feet per unit, which is the minimum size we presently require for an accessory apartment. The Metro Center, should be noted that in the Metro Center regs, there is no minimum unit size, but we have there's a maximum density obviously based on bedrooms per acre. So again, the market study was showing that there's strong demand for single-person households, which would likely be a viable candidate for a smaller unit, and a smaller unit obviously translates to potential more affordability. What's not, no, it's okay. It's not mentioned on this slide or other slides, but there was also a discussion, and it's in the body of the report, to also encourage more accessible, handicapped accessible units within both areas. So furthering downtown, presently our regs permit 5 stories at 50 feet. And we don't have a lot of examples of 5-story buildings, so the recommendation was to reduce the height downtown from 5 stories to 4, but increase the height from 50 to 52 feet. Along the same lines of what we discussed earlier with Commerce Drive, is that, especially you want to require for new construction a 15-foot first floor height, which is what, modern uses are, and also some discussion to increase the floor area ratio, which is presently limited to 2 times the lot size in downtown, to 3 times the lot size, to, again, create broader opportunity. The idea behind this whole study and these recommendations is, that we're not designing a private development for anybody. Our role is to put a menu out there of what's permissible, and if there's development and investment to be made, we want to try to reduce that barrier to that investment. Similar to what we talked about downtown, some additional screening requirements for buffered and first floor parking structures. There's a recommendation to expand from abutting or 500 feet to allow shared parking within 1,000 feet again, if there are opportunities to have joint parking within a reasonable walking distance. Right now, our regulations limit that to 500 feet. The recommendation is to increase that to 500 feet. I'm sorry, to 1,000 feet. And also, again, to encourage car sharing potential. So what does that look like? These are going to be hard slides to look at, I understand. But what this report, if you, and what we're going to encourage you to do is read through this report and offer us any feedback you might have. But at the end of the day, the recommendations are going to boil down to potential regulation updates. And so what might that look like? And I know this is, it's a lot of text on this slide, but to take those recommendations that the report has, it's going to take some regulatory change. Again, reducing from 35,000 feet to 10,000 feet. Again, this first 2 slides are unique to the Metro Center, not downtown, to the Metro Center only. Reduce that minimum lot size for eligibility for the TOD overlay. Raise the height potential to 70 feet, but still capped at 5 stories. Again, right size the retail, 20% of floor area maximum for single building, but with language that is going to tie to a map in the plan that would require retail uses at key nodes in that area. That goes along the line with the next bullet there, and also talking about minimum floor area of 1,500 feet of commercial space, not any individual tenant, but an aggregate in any given building. And again, if there's going to be ground floor residential, that it should still have the minimum ceiling height, so it could be convertible later to other potential commercial uses down the road. And the next one is, again, a recap of some of the landscape and buffer screening. We'll go to the next one. Yeah, this is last for Metro, more screening. Oh, seems to be an overlap there. That's okay. Again, the big call out here is recommending increase to density, as I said before, to 75 bedrooms per acre, and reducing the minimum unit size in the base underlying zone of the designed commercial district. And again, with respect to parking, once 75 spaces are achieved, then consider dropping that unit of the 1 space per residential unit of parking, and then equalizing the requirements for dining uses with retail, again, to make it less cumbersome for folks to be able to transition from a commercial tenant to a restaurant tenant and back and forth. Again, this is summing up to try to increase the affordable, increase the below market rate units to 12% from 10, and then potential allowing another range of incomes for sale units.
And for those for sale units, the range within the report is 100 to 120% was the recommendation. And in conversation with Mark, one of the issues has been that when you end up with 80% of median income for home ownership, it's a lot different than rental, where home ownership comes with a leaky roof that you have to fix that costs $10,000. And when you have somebody who's at such a low income level, those little surprises end up can potentially be devastating. Even when, when they qualify and the sales price is still limited to no more than whatever that calculation is, so that the monthly payments aren't more than 30%, it's still very difficult to maintain long-term home ownership in a very stable way. So Mark, even though his concern is that those units aren't going to count, if they're for sale, he just doesn't think that there's realistic long-term viability unless we increase the actual household income for those units. So that's kind of the struggle that we're dealing with in terms of thinking it through. But again, the report gives a range between 100 and 120%. So just think about it as you look at the report.
And I think our last, is this our last slide? Is,
Yes.
These are recommendations particular to downtown. Again, removing the 50% residential floor area limitation, but still requiring the first floor to be active commercial use. Reducing the minimum unit size from 750 feet to 450 feet. Increasing the floor area ratio from 2 to 3. Kind of a mixed bag on height. Reducing the story height, but allowing a couple of feet more in height in total. Capping it at 4 stories, again, to achieve that higher ground floor. There wasn't a lot of support broadly for 5-story buildings downtown. We have one example, so that is not that impactful in terms of reduction of potential. Reducing the parking requirement, again, considering matching the TOD requirement for residential to one per bedroom, the lesser of 1 per bedroom or 1.25 spaces per unit. And then on non-post road frontage, allowing a little broader use categorization for some of the business and professional offices that can occupy those spaces. That is a pretty quick overview, but shouldn't be unfamiliar to you since you've been actively participating in this. I would encourage you to take a look at this plan. You'll note that some of the pages were a little, we kind of put our, and I should thank our consultant team, Ben and Kathleen from Goody Clancy, did a tremendous job leading our public outreach and putting this together. Some of the pages are a little clunky. They're supposed to be double-sided. We had some trouble this afternoon, kind of pieces. Emmeline did a Herculean job of getting it to the point that it is, but it will get refined in page order. So all the pages are there, but some of them are not double-sided. So if you see that, it's because we're just having trouble with the way it was printing. So again, I want to thank Mark, who's not here. This all started with a grant through his office, and we all thought, this commission and the Economic Development Commission thought that this study could be an important component of our POCD effort. It's been a really interesting ride. It's been great working with our folks with Goody Clancy. There's a handful of folks sitting behind me in the public that have been actively engaged with us all along, so I thank those folks and all the other folks that have participated in this, and we now have a product that we'll hope to have up on our website by week's end and have a comment period and allow time for you guys to take a look at this document. If there's anything that you have questions about or disagree with, please let us know. But other than that, we're happy to engage in a dialogue or questions, or I don't know if anybody in the audience wants to say anything at this point.
Thanks very much, Jim, Emmeline. Very, very helpful. And I echo your thoughts on behalf of the commission, thanking Mark and members of the public that were deeply engaged, and the consultants, and you two. You've both done a lot of work on this. We have been living with this off and on now for almost a year, and I've spent a lot of time on it. We had those 4 public hearing sessions, which, as you noted, were pretty well attended. I mean, I actually voiced at one point, for a town of 60-odd plus or minus 1,000 residents, not all of whom are adults, of course. We had 90 or 100 people at Penfield on one night. We had, which That's a pretty big number, but, you know, I'd like for the public to become even more engaged, you know, so during this public comment period. I will, I guess for format here, why don't I open it up to members of the public who can
I'll put a
speak?
mic, I'll put a mic.
All right? And then, once we have, if anyone would like to speak, then we can engage in whatever the kind of discussion that we'd like to. Also recognizing that for most of the members, you know, they're seeing this summary, while the considerations have all been circulated and everything, but, you know, it's like this is the first time. So are there any members of the public that wish to comment, come and talk? Step right up. Just, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming out and being here. Just to name and
Yeah, sure. Dom DeFonte, live on Home Fair Drive, been in Fairfield for 9 years now.
Can you just pull the mic just a little bit closer to you? Yeah, that's great.
Is that better?
Yeah, yeah, thanks.
Great. Yeah, so I've been in town for 9 years now. Lived in pretty much same section of Fairfield. Moved here from Stanford. Lived in Stanford for 6 years. The TOD study highlights me as a millennial. I left the rat race. I didn't want to be on a hamster wheel in Stamford, Connecticut. You know, so I moved here because it's a quainter town. So I personally just have some concerns around, you know, how this impacts the character of our town and of our neighborhood. So got involved with the High Street development, and that kind of brought me to some awareness about some other developments that are happening in town. So thought I'd come in and get some feedback. So thanks for doing the study. I guess some questions I have. One of them is around the residential change around the TOD zones. It sounds like the only residential change or changes to the residential zones is related to adding some residential properties that are closer to commercial zones into those commercial zones. Is that correct?
There aren't any specific recommendations to convert presently commercial zones to TOD. One of the downtown in particular, there's some discussion about perhaps broadening the center design district boundary line, but that would be limited to parcels that are already commercially zoned.
Okay. All right, so there's no, like, I guess it didn't seem like from the presentation there's any recommended zoning changes to actual properties that are residential in terms of making easement changes, et cetera. So
That's correct.
that's good. I guess with all of the development that's happening in Stanford, I work on Cummings Point Road, right next to the crab shell. They're putting skyscrapers all along the area for residential apartments. I guess my one chief concern is we go and develop a bunch of residential properties in Fairfield, and the demand drops because there's so much of an oversupply in Stanford. And I'm not sure if this is the right forum to discuss it, or a forum with Mark to kind of get a sense of, you know, what is the right move strategically for these TOD zones? Is it, you know, do we add more residential properties, and is that going to, are we going to have the demand for millennials who likely want to live closer to a city? Or are we going to start competing with other towns that are doing the same thing?
So thanks. I don't know if we typically don't engage in like question and answer right for the public.
Yeah.
So what I think would be helpful is if you made your comments. You're raising great points. I don't know if you attended any of the workshops that we had.
Yeah.
Some of those. I mean, the answer to your question that you just asked is that we just spent a year doing a study answering that question.
Yep.
Right? What is the best thing? Then the consultants, after all of this work and public input and analysis, have made these recommendations to address those variables. And so originally the plans for Metro Center were much more grand. We had a minimum lot size for development of 30, we have presently of 35,000 square feet. And there, it's not getting developed. We have Trademark 1, built, residential, as Mr. Wendt reviewed. And the residential part is snapped up. Unmet demand for residential, smaller, near the Metro Center. So the recommendations after all that analysis are in some ways to try to meet that unmet demand, try to encourage more development of the properties that are available for development.
Yep.
And you know, there's been some comment, you hear a little chit chat about all the overdevelopment. What we're talking about here are parcels that have sat vacant for years and years. We're talking about certain plots of land that are zoned industrial. We're talking about a brand new train station at which we were supposed to have an anchor office tenant of 1 million square feet. These things didn't happen. So we've spent the better part of a year and got a grant from the state, some town money, and lots of resources to try to assess what to do from here.
Yep.
And so that's where all that comes from. And I mean, I hope I'm
Yeah.
engaging and answering the question
No,
that, you know, that you're asking, because it's a good one. And I'm happy to talk about it, because for every one of the members of the public that comes in and asks that question and you know, talks about the issues, it becomes, you know, a better dialogue, right?
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I just,
Yeah.
if I may, Mr. Chairman, just to add, you know, in the presentation that we just walked through is a brief summary. I think many of the issues
Yeah.
that you raised, again, and well so, are more fleshed out within the text of the report. I mean, if it was just handed out tonight, obviously nobody's had a chance to look at it yet. But once you have the opportunity to review that, I think it addresses many of the points that you made, and I'm happy to continue the dialogue after you've had an opportunity to look at it. If you've got other comments, you know, we'd be happy to hear them.
yeah. And after you've had a chance to digest, you know, and there are like specific things that, you know, concerns, recommendations, requests, you know, please submit them. You can email them, call Mr. Wendt, you know.
The other
send
thing
him a
that's
letter.
not in this document is there's several appendices, which are, you know, the background real estate analysis that was done that's kind of the background data for many of these recommendations. It's over a 200-page.
Mhm.
We weren't going to print that, but that's going to be, it's already actually on our, on the
Yeah.
study website presently, but it'll be an appendix to this report.
Right, and I should say, for the members of the public that are listening at home, and those who are here and you, that we do have a microsite on the town's website, the TPZ website, where we have a number of things, and we will be adding more by the end of this week.
Yeah, the TOD study has its own page, and all the documents in the presentations that have been made thus far are there, including the background. But again, many of the issues that you raised were all issues that were shared by other folks that participated, and they are addressed in some measure in the report. And if they're not, if you think they're not satisfactorily addressed, we'd welcome your comments.
Yep.
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, I look at this
Yeah.
presentation, I saw the study, I wasn't aware of the public outreach, and I don't think that that's a fault of the town. I think that local journalism's kind of dying off, and I think that's impacting the availability of the information to some of the residents that, you know, commute into the
Yep,
city
yep.
or into Stanford.
I agree.
So I appreciate it, and no, I'll be engaged, and you know.
All right.
Thanks for being here.
Excellent.
Thanks for
Well,
being here.
Thanks
Yep.
very much. Anybody else? Any other members of the public? Thank you.
Jan Reber, Belmont Street. I just want to thank you for this has been really incredible for all of us as a learning experience. We've looked at this in a holistic way, and I think it's really been of real value. I'd like to ask you, though, to consider one thing, and that is Bridgeport's considering doing a lot of development in close proximity to Metro Center. And I wonder if wouldn't be a good idea for you to have some data on what they're planning to do in Black Rock in immediate vicinity to the Metro Center, because they're really considering doing quite a bit there. Not that it'll make changes for anything you want to do, but I think it's worth taking a look at. And I hope we can reserve the right, you know, I heard 10%, 11%, 12% affordable. I don't like those numbers. I hope we can convince you for larger developments to increase that, but we'll get to that.
Right,
Thanks.
very good. Thank you. Anyone else like to take the mic? Excellent.
Good evening, John Wynn, Southport resident. I'm also serving on the town's strategic planning committee. Just a couple of tidbits. We're midstream with doing the strategic plan. We did a very significant community outreach component of that work, where we did surveys, we held workshops, we held many different type of planning workshops all across the community. And we have those results summarized in what we call a community outreach. And I know the chair has a copy of that, and I can circulate it to the rest of the committee if you would like. A couple of key points from that. Everyone's concerned about development in town. Everyone's concerned about taxes in town. Town character frequently came up during the course of that discussion. The challenge that people seem to most readily focus on are our ability to continue funding our investment in education and what that's doing to the tax base and the taxes here in town. And the question comes up, well, if you can't continue to have your taxes increase, but you want to continue to maintain the investment in education, what's something that people would be willing to consider? And the answer that seems to come back is commercial development. To help the town leverage the components of its commercial property to garner a greater level of tax revenues to continue to make the town affordable for everyone. For the residential taxpayers, to have it the type of commercial development that would allow thoughtful development, and I see a lot of great ideas in the material that were presented. I participated in all of the workshops, so I'm very familiar with the material. Any kind of change is difficult for people to accept, and it's, you know, brings the fear of what things will happen. If there's economic viability enhanced by making these changes, I think people would rally around it, as long as it doesn't change things too drastically, too fast, and then you alienate people. But the need for commercial development to better support the tax base here in town is a clear, compelling message that came out of it. And I think people, if they're thoughtful about what they want for their community, we can manage our way through a lot of these changes, but we need to continue to maintain its affordability for everyone, and taxes is a key component of that.
Excellent, thank you. And Mr. Nguyen, thank you also for all the time and effort that you've been dedicating to the Strategic Planning Committee, and I appreciate that. We all appreciate that. And so, but specifically, yes, if you would, why don't you, just for the communication issue, why don't you send the public outreach documents to Mr. Nguyen? You got them too.
I can forward it to the
So then,
entire
yeah, why don't you send them to the
That's all right.
commission?
I haven't done so yet, but if it's
Right.
good with you, I'll put you.
Yeah, okay. That's great. And I'll be in touch with you this week. Anyone else? Any other members of the public? Hi there.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jennifer Jacobson, and I'll be happy to follow up because I have several questions that I would like to ask, so I'll be happy to put those in an email form. But my public comment for tonight is also that I also participated in some of the previous presentations in the last year. And what I'll be looking for in terms of the questions that I'll be sending you is some greater detail in terms of the fiscal analysis that was done, in terms of what you backed out from the revenue the revenue projections, and how you came up with those numbers in terms of sitting down and looking at the budget and what was backed out of that. I'm also concerned a little bit about, I know it's a very small number of students that you're looking to add. I mean, the average is 0.13 per unit. However, I've also want to know what your estimated number of units is over the 20-year period, not just the 5, because we have that. So just using those numbers alone, I'm estimating several hundred. So just want to make sure that we're not only thinking about infrastructure in regards to town planning, like sidewalks and sewers and waters and all of that kind of infrastructure, but making sure that as we move forward, that we actually have the capacity in our school district to accommodate all of these new hundreds, if not thousands of students, which I don't believe we currently do. So just food for thought, and just some further backup material posted on the website would be great in terms of the fiscal numbers.
Yep.
That'd be great, thank you.
Good. I appreciate the comment. Just as you're looking, and obviously you haven't had a chance to digest this yet, but there is a table on page 24
Okay.
that breaks down the 5, 10, 15, 20-year projections,
Oh, you did
including
for the
a
units?
number of units.
I got to page 7.
Yeah, that's okay.
Because this is a new one from the other ones that are
No,
online.
again, I
right?
don't expect anybody to have had a chance to, I'm surprised you got that far. but-
I'm looking for certain stuff, so
Yeah.
thank you so much.
But thank you
No,
for your comments.
Thank
Sure.
you, thank you very much. I think with respect to the school children, some people, I think, lose sight of the fact that as the years go on, the students leave, they matriculate out of the schools, and then they're replaced with, with new students. And so, but those figures are all in the larger study, and there are surveys done. And one of the things I found interesting about the larger report was all the data that the consultants pulled together from other parts of the United States, like other similar towns and cities, about the ebbs and flows of populations and school-age children and income data and, desired size of units and number of bedrooms and all that kind of stuff. And so,
Yeah, in the capacity to absorb new residents is an important consideration. Obviously, this plan, both from a sewer traffic infrastructure and certainly school impact, is clearly an important consideration. There is more detail, again, in the appendices in terms of the financial analysis that was done that's already up there, but yes, that was part of their consideration.
yeah. And then, on top of that, I have one member of the public who gets up and says, well, what if we do this and, like, nobody rents any of the apartments? What if they just, there's no demand for what we've done? And then I have, another member of the public who gets up and says, well, hold on a minute, we're going to overrun the schools, and it's a challenge, no doubt, but that's why we're spending as much time and resources as we are in trying to study this from, as Mr. Reber said, from a holistic approach, not just looking at, the Metro Center, but the town as a whole. Not just our trends and data, but also trends and data from the region, the 5-town region. I personally participated, along with Mr. Wendt and others, in the greater regional planning sessions to try to fit our planning together with the regional planning. And then I also attended another session, which was the New York Metro regional planning. And I was the first I was exposed to it, and frankly, I was a bit shocked, frankly, that there is a very detailed master plan that was first developed in, I think it was the 20s or the 30s for the New York region, and it's been updated 5 times, if I'm getting this. This is the 4th one. This is the 4th, and so you think about that, right? So it's almost 100 years, and this is the 4th revision. And then you say, wow, only 4? And then you look at it and you're like, yeah, okay, 4 covers 25 years. And the kinds of data and analysis that go into that study and preparation then trickles down right to the regional area, and then we leverage the resources and information that we can get from the regional planning development, and that all feeds into our consideration of the revisions to our town master plan, and then from there down to the different areas of town and the transportation overlay districts. So this is one part of a much larger holistic look at, you know, what we're doing and trying to plan for the town. And I hope that makes sense.
Just another comment, Mr. Chairman, in not in response, but along the lines of Mr. Nguyen's commentary. Obviously, the bottom line is important piece of all of this in terms of, you know, reducing the burden of taxes. And on page 7 of the report, there's a quick breakdown of at least the example of Trademark 1 that, you know, prior to its development had a $2 million property assessment that's gone up to $19.6 million. So their taxes have increased from approximately $50,000 to $450,000. So that one development alone is a $400+ thousand annual increase in taxes. So,
Yeah.
So there's an example in there. So clearly, the economic impact, both in terms of you know, increased tax revenues and also in turn, you know, increased impact on the town's resources are clearly an important part of this
Right.
whole endeavor.
Yeah, and it's a balance, right? We have to take that all into consideration. And that's just one parcel. So you look at that slide that we had with the different scenarios, B and C and what have you, for just the Metro Center alone. And if we have, you know, just a handful of those buildings and those lots get developed and we gain some traction, the impact that we could have on the tax revenue in town is very substantial,
Yep.
really substantial. And, you know, that's what we're all trying to get to. Right. Any other members of the board? You just kind of went off on this. This is great. I mean, anybody else have any comments here? I mean, we just keep on.
A unique
talking,
opportunity.
You know, but yeah, it is. Anyone else like to talk? Yeah.
My name's Catherine Giff, and I live in Lake Hills, in Tamor. Kind of a thought, as I think it's kind of going with what everybody else is saying. You know, you say commercial, and then you say the rental and residential, and so for the common person in our town, we're still like, well, it's residential, it's commercial, but you know what it is. And if we're looking at residences, our changing demographics really show, you know, we're not really traditional families anymore, you know, the 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath colonials, the bigger space. So just as a comment, it would be kind of cool if we could also integrate like some type of changing housing styles for our different demographics, which is predominantly going to be, as the baby boomers come, we're going to have smaller household sizes dominated by adults, and generally multi-generational adults. You know, we have 20,000 residents that are already over the age of 50, and many of them are sitting in the 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath colonials. And then you look at, you know, and it would be trend setting. I don't know where this type of data is, but, you know, maybe one of the floors could be set up for kind of maybe communal living for, you know, I'm kind of thinking of 75-year-olds, people who are living alone, who maybe they could share an apartment but have enough of their space. So kind of like a design type thing. And I
Right.
didn't know if there was any way to introduce that type of concept for that.
So, who was it that circulated the small homes?
There's,
Housing and shared,
You remember that?
yeah. It was
yeah, the Fairfield Senior Advocates is been
Yeah.
active in promoting housing choice. And I think that's going to be a broader discussion within the POCD housing section.
Yeah.
You know, again, this is looking specifically at the areas around transit, where clearly some of the issues that the last speaker just raised have broader applicability in our town, and I think that's going to be the discussion to be had when we take up the housing policy discussion in the broader POCD context.
Right. So, one of the what committee was she from?
Fairfield Senior Advocates.
Fairfield Senior Advocates had circulated to us, it was a book, right? On these communal style living arrangements where they were like little bungalows around a courtyard, shared courtyard, where, and then they had a shared, like, cooking and dining facility in another, you know, I mean, talk radically different from what you see in a typical, you know, housing stock today, right? But something like that, as Mr. Wendt describes, is really, is that thunder?
I hope so. Otherwise it's something,
Wow.
something bigger.
Is something that's going to be more appropriate in other sections of town, not necessarily in an immediately adjacent to the Metro Center, let's say, right? But these are the kinds of ideas that we need to start talking about and having the other members of the public engaged in talking about, because if the sense of the town is that we want to facilitate, you know, building, you know, communities of bungalows around communal, shared central space, then we need to start talking about where are we going to put that, right? Is that going to happen at the beach area? Is it going to be in the middle of downtown? Is it going to be in Greenfield Hill? Is it, you know, right? Where do we want to see something like that happen? In order to facilitate something like that, we need to revise our regulations to provide the opportunity for people to do that. Well, our regulations are applicable in certain sections of town. Like tonight we're talking about Metro Center, Downtown Design District, et cetera, right? So where do we want to see something like that? And that's my ask to the members of the public who are watching, you know, right now. Send in an email. You want to see communal style living? Share with us where you think that would be most appropriate in town and how you'd like to see that thought about for development. Commissioner Levy.
Yes, I'd just like to add that if any members of the commission or public are interested, there is a co-housing development going up right now in Bethany. I think it's the first in the state, which involves a whole design community with certain common areas and facilities, and then basically single-family residences all connected.
Mm-hmm.
So it's being done right now, and it's something we may want to look at in the future.
Thank you. That's Bentley, Connecticut?
Bethany, Connecticut, yes.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Not to blindside you, but I'm also working with Fairfield Senior Advocates. So
you
and
know-
that was
you know
from
the book that
Carrie,
I'm talking-
and that's Carrie Mackover, who I work with.
Okay.
And we've met with Emmeline and Jim. So that's kind of my job, just to get us thinking about different housing styles. Now, Carrie really likes the single. We're all trying to advocate different things. So my specific point was to incorporate maybe more communal areas in the apartments that we're building, what I'm calling the traditional rental apartments, and working with the developers there, because there, you know, we go from the 4.5, you know, the large colonials to 450 square foot studio apartment. You know, there's something called middle housing. So there's a whole lot to be educated on
Right,
in that
450
whole
square
middle
foot.
section.
Yeah, 450 square foot studios where every single one of them has a kitchen and a dining room.
Right,
And
so
and
using, if we could design maybe some different floors, or have somebody who does that, like, just, that's what I'm trying to do. Introduce different ideas as we're building, so that then we're not stuck trying to find a pocket neighborhood, you know, and how many houses or bungalows or cottages can be developed. But if we can actually redesign one floor or 2 floors, you know, so we're not talking assisted living, we're actually talking independent living, but some type of community, and that might be possible in an apartment.
Right.
You know, for
Well,
one of those
certainly,
floors.
so, you know, when we think about the regulations around Metro Center and about the variables and the sizes and spaces and such, there could be incentives for designing a communal living floor that would be enticing to a developer, right? To gain some kind of something, I suppose.
I didn't want you to be blindsided as we're all like
No,
dropping our
no,
heads.
no, that's what we're here
trying
for.
to unify the effort.
Right. Yeah.
There would be retail, hopefully, and certainly restaurants and movie theaters in that area, so it would be conducive to that type of
Okay,
flooring.
good. Any other members of the public? Yep, go on up.
My name is, oh, sorry.
That's okay. You can pull it up a little bit.
Okay. My name is Douglas Price, and I'm a resident of the Stratfield neighborhood, and I work for the Institute for Sustainable Cities at Hunter College in the city. And had just wanted to make the comment that I think that one very important thing that needs to be addressed in planning, especially for developments like Metro Center, and with the intention of trying to draw more residential development around transit nodes, is integrating biking and pedestrian transport. That this is something that, when you look at the area now, seems like a far-off concern, given the amount of traffic that's there, but that if the intention is to build up a mixed-use development with a lot of residential square footage, then being able to integrate biking and pedestrian access is something that would make that a more successful sort of situation. That right now there are a lot of people who actually do bike to Fairfield Metro. There's limited bicycle parking, limited security, lots of access issues in terms of being able to get to the station. But if there were an opportunity to actually come up with an integrated bikeway plan for that area that connects with other parts of town, that connects with Black Rock, that I think that could make it a lot easier for people to avoid automobile transport to the station and to live in that area without having to rely on automobiles. And right now in New York City, there's a large conflict about how you integrate biking with existing transportation, with parking concerns, commercial property owners who are concerned about losing business because there's less parking, and then the conflict between the city itself and businesses that are relying on electric bikes. I think electric bikes are something that could be a real game changer for someplace like Fairfield, where people are commuting longer distances over a lot of hills to be able to get to locations. They may not bike now because that's really not you'd have to be in very good shape and primed to do that, especially in inclement weather. But when you have e-bikes introduced, it makes it a lot more possible for people to do their normal day-to-day activities using a bicycle instead of a car. It's something that may not be happening now to any great degree, but it's something that could happen very quickly if we were providing the infrastructure for it.
Great. Thank you.
So I just wanted to address your concern about electric bicycles. We're part of the MetroCog region, which includes Bridgeport, Stratford, Easton, Monroe, and Trumbull. And right now they're getting ready to try to put together an RFP for a test period for electric bicycles and electric scooters. I think most of the towns are more enthusiastic about electric bicycles than electric scooters. Because there's been very public issues with electric scooters. And certainly I think for most of the Fairfield staff, including Public Works and planning staff, we've felt a little more comfortable with having specifically located docks so that they don't become a tripping hazard or a nuisance or that type of thing. But it is in the works at the regional level, just because we understand that, some people who live in Bridgeport may also work at the Trumbull Mall, or people who live in Bridgeport may need help with that last mile kind of transportation to get to work in the restaurants and retail environment in Fairfield. So it's in the works right now, whether it's the RFP goes out sometime in the fall. I think summer's not realistic, but if it goes out in the fall in preparation for the next warm season starting in the spring, I think that's kind of the target dates.
Yeah. I just to speak for myself, I was considering purchasing an e-bike, a cargo bike, something that's large enough to actually take care of errands and things. And it's a big investment, $1,600 at least. And I'm leery of doing that, given that I don't know about secure parking, and the marked bikeways are limited. And so if there was more infrastructure and more planning taking e-bikes into account, then I think people might be willing to actually make the investment and make that leap, like myself.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public want to comment? Okay. Thank you. Any other members of the commission have any comments, questions?
I do. I have a question for staff. What does the impact, if we do raise the beds per acre on newer projects or change the rules, would any developers balk at what has been approved already, and would they stall their projects in order to reapply and try to get the newer regulations?
That's a good question. Does that possibly exist? I guess it does. The two examples, I mean, Trademark 1's already done and occupied, so that ship has sailed. You know, Trademark 2 is coming out of the ground. If you haven't been by, you know, the crane is there. Segments of concrete are being put in place as, well, not as we speak, but starting a couple weeks ago, it's rising out pretty quickly. So they're going forward. If they were to stop and retool their plan and reapply to this commission for something else, you know, that's theoretically possible, but given the investment they've already made in their progress to date, I don't anticipate that being the case.
Would they look at this as a disadvantage? They're building to, what is it, 75 beds per acre or 50 beds per acre, and newer developments that get approved
I
in
don't
the
know.
future?
That's a good question. That, you know, I don't think so. I mean, there's some pieces in here that they will benefit from as well,
Right.
in terms of the ease, you know, equalizing the parking, for example. Who knows? They may have an opportunity to do other projects down the road, but I think them being first, they were able to capture that the thinnest layer of the market, which is at the highest end, and where more units at smaller levels will broaden the marketplace, so to speak, but, you know, at lesser cost per square foot per unit to the renters. So, I mean, I don't know. I think they're in a pretty good place, being leaders in the, you know, being the first ones in, creating, you know, almost kind of setting the market, if you will. So I don't know. I don't anticipate that they're going to retool their whole development proposal at this point. But is it a possibility? Yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so the sense that I got from the developers that participated in the public forums that we had was, and I shouldn't say developers, stakeholders, you know, right, was that they were very supportive of this effort, because if successful, it will create an environment that will fuel the success of their current projects, and their, you know, it'll create a vibrant, you know, space for their investments to thrive. That was my read.
No,
on
I
their
agree,
comments.
and I didn't. I was
And
remiss.
additional opportunities for other projects.
I was remiss in my initial remarks not to mention that there was, as part of the outreach, there was specific stakeholder discussions that were held privately, in the developers of the trademark properties were actively involved in that and participated, and it came to the public.
That's
And
what I'm
and we're very forthcoming with their experience, with us sharing their data with us, sharing their you know, pro forma stuff with our consultants to help build the economic model and test it to make sure that the economic assumptions that they were building into the recommendations made sense, and they were, and I thank them for that, for engaging. The economic consultant spoke directly with them, and they were actively and willingly engaged in that discussion. So I thank them for that.
I mean, when you think about something as simple as a parking study, right? The numbers on the parking didn't just come out of thin air, right? And experience with parking demand in a structure like Trademark is going to be even different in the Metro Center area as it is going to be in the downtown area, as it is going to be, you know, like elsewhere in town, right? And so they were kind enough to share the fruits of their labor. They paid for it, you know, and we now have actual data on experience with the parking demands on a building like Trademark in Metro Center, I mean, we got a little fishbowl. We have a little Petri dish. And so we're now reacting in a constructive way to the data and experience that we have right there, right? So we can say, hey, and that's where the plateau of 75, and now I'm talking generally to members of the public as well. When you think about how do we say, well, once you reach 75 spaces, then you can sort of come down a little bit from there. Well, it was from data that we had been provided for the experience at Trademark One that, you know, half the spaces during the day are empty because half the cars leave. They only have at peak demand ever 91, and they have 100 and some odd, 131 spaces.
Oh, I thought you were talking about units. 101 residential units. Yeah, way more than that. That's in terms of parking spaces.
I'm recollecting
okay.
the actual numbers,
No,
you know, but the point I'm trying to make, right, is that we have looked at lots of data. We've gotten economic modeling from experts who have looked at budgets and forecasts and all the rest of it. And so to your point, right, like that's important. Yeah. Exactly. It's data specific
I think
to experience in that
we're
area.
incredibly fortunate to have those two developments that we have, not only because it kind of bridges the theoretical to the actual, and you know, and those came out of the first Commerce Drive area study, what this commission thought would be the model development, and they've produced it. So,
Right.
and we're hoping to build on that success.
Yeah, so, and you know, that's, we've been fortunate that they have engaged on that level and been supportive in that way. Anybody else? Yeah. Commissioner Levy?
Yeah. Just like to inquire of staff as to whether there's a timetable or what is our planning
Well,
going forward in terms of addressing some of
That's a
these
good question.
issues.
We're going to, again, this is in draft form. We're going to clean up the document a little bit in terms of the way it's put together, the graphics. In any other, I would say, you know, that once it's up on the website, maybe a 2-week period for people to look at it and make comments. Certainly, we want to know from you if you think we've missed the mark anywhere in this document. Things that you may not support, things that may, hopefully there's no surprises in here, the things that we've discussed a great deal of this. So I would say, you know, we're going to have another conference call with our consultant team, and then we'll have a better idea when we're going to have a finished document. I mean, this is pretty close to being it, but it's going to be this document. Just tighten up.
Right. And then I want to be really clear also that once this is published and put up, when we go open for, you know, public comments, that all those materials will be available on the TPZ website, and there will be a period of time that the public can submit written comments, can participate, ask questions, etc. We'll likely have that comment period for 30 days.
Yeah, I mean, we can leave that to your discretion, but once we have the finished version of this up and published, then we can put out a press release and a notice on our website and to our agenda list and stuff that there's a comment.
And to the gentleman's point, I forget who it was over here about the public relations, for journalism, not getting the word out. He left. I mean, we do the best we can, right? I mean, we publish it on the website. We push it out to the mailing lists. Please tell all of your people to sign up for the TPZ mailing list, okay? The mailing list, right? You'll get the agenda every other week, okay? Somebody can go down to and get the packet, but we push it out to the distribution lists. We send it out to the newspaper. We try to get these things out to as many people as we can. And, I stopped getting the Fairfield Citizen at home. They stopped delivering it to my house,
Yeah, I agree with the gentleman. The local news isn't what it used to be.
Yeah, so, but we will, and look out for it, all right? We're going to put the comment period open. And if there are things that people don't like, then they need to let us know.
And particularly, I'd be interested in perhaps input from various committees, like the Affordable Housing Commission, and
Yep.
get their views and additional information on, I mean, there's some substantial changes recommended in here,
Right.
which I would certainly be interested in their views as to how that would impact on our goal of spreading affordable housing throughout the community.
No, I agree. Yeah. So, Commissioner Wright.
I didn't have a comment specific to the details raised tonight, but, and I don't know if my fellow sort of Stratford area commissioners are finding this, but people are really getting excited about what's happening in general, like the stuff on Kings Highway Kings Highway by us, that the state's been doing, has changed people's attitudes of, they're getting optimistic that there might be development along Kings Highway, and that's going to stretch over to Commerce or perhaps be influenced from this plan around the Metro Center. That whole strip of Commerce Drive where all the auto dealers are going is starting to look nicer. The local businesses are changing. We just approved another dealership that's going to do some beautiful improvements along there. And, because for a long time, we felt like no one was really paying attention to the east side of town, and we're starting to see changes.
Good.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, thanks, everybody. Thank you for coming out. Appreciate it. And I'll adjourn the meeting.